is a really kind of pretty nasty security hole in the software that's used by many websites to protect your privacy. The sites, as you know, we've talked before, if you're using e-banking or online commerce, you're usually on a secure connection. Sometimes it'll say HTTPS, that's for secure. Or, on older browsers, you'd get a lock and key and the key's closed. There are various ways of indicating it's a secure connection. And, we really encourage sites to do that for years. Our security gurus have said, please just turn it on. There's no reason not to. Many sites use open source software for the website. That's browsers like Apache or Nginx. And they also, in many cases, use a library. This is very frequently the case. You don't write this stuff from scratch, especially crypto. It's hard to do right. So they use a library called OpenSSL, Secure Socket Layer. And it turns out for the last 2 years, there's been a pretty nasty bug in this library. And it's estimated about 2/3 of all the websites out there are using it. So this bug, and we're not really sure how it got in there. It was added to the OpenSSL library on a New Year's Eve a couple of years ago, New Year's Eve 2011. And there's some curiosity about who put it there and why. I've seen stories now, and I don't know if it's substantiated, that our own federal government, the NSA, has been using this flaw, this security bug, for all that time. Some might even, I think there's good cause to think this might even have been done by them. Maybe not, though, because it doesn't give you the kind of access. If you're a spy, you really want better access than this. What this bug allows a rogue site to do, or a rogue page to do, is read the memory of the server. To look what's... Imagine if they could read your memory, how what would be revealed. They can't read it all at once. They can only read a small chunk, 64K at a time. But it leaves no trace, and it can do it over and over and again. And most servers aren't recording that this is happening, and so it could have been happening for 2 years since we didn't know about this bug. So let's say I'm a bad guy, and I really want to start collecting Facebook passwords. Facebook, one of the companies that seems to be using this, Twitter and Google as well, this flawed software. So let's say I'm a bad guy, and I want to just kind of collect Facebook stuff. I can read 64K. I can't specify which 64K or even what's, I can't tell them what I want. I can just read it. And I could do it again and again and again over a long period of time. After a while, you might start garnering some interesting information. You'd certainly see people logging in. You'd see the passwords probably in the clear. So it would be a good way to collect that. You'd also be able to compromise the security certificate that's used by that site. So that's another avenue of attack. Then a bad guy, knowing that information, could pretend to be Facebook and could perpetrate something called a man-in-the-middle attack, where you think you're going to Facebook, you're not. You go into the bad guy's site, and then he's passing it on to Facebook, meanwhile collecting what you're doing. So that's the kind of thing. I guess Facebook's probably not a good example. Your bank might be a better example. Most banks for 2 years, or many banks for 2 years, have just been vulnerable to this. They can grab 64K at a time. The question is whether this has been done at all, who's been doing it, and how much value they're getting from it. And I think the first thing I'd say, although you'll see a lot of media reports and kind of a lot of scare tactics, first thing I'd say is don't panic. It doesn't mean that you can't, for instance, go to your bank and say, give me all the passwords and all the accounts. You can't. And we don't know yet how widespread this is. It might not have been at all. But it's not a bad thing to change your passwords. It's a bit of a task. I think Tumblr, who was compromised, Tumblr said, take the day off and change all your passwords. I don't think you should really take the day off work and change all your passwords. However, there are a few passwords you might want to change. And it's not a bad idea to do it from time to time anyway. This would be a great time to kind of get your whole password thing in line, your password strategy in line. I would suggest, for instance, that we start using something called LastPass. This is a free product that's really good. I use it. If you've been using LastPass all along, you really are safer than most people because you can do a security audit now on your LastPass passwords, and it'll tell you which ones you need to change. There's one little thing about changing the passwords that's kind of relevant. If the bank or the email server or the site you want to fix hasn't yet fixed the hole, then the bad guy can continue to get your password. They have to fix it before changing your password makes any sense. A lot of sites have said it, but most banks aren't even talking about this. They prefer not to. Imagine if you're, a big bank, you don't want to tell your customers, we don't know what's happened, but maybe you should change your password. That's just going to scare people. So it's not a bad idea. There's a lot of misinformation floating around, a lot of scary stuff. Listen to me, because I've really checked this out with all our security experts, and I've done a lot of reading, and I think without a doubt that the right advice is it never hurts to change your password. Here's a good time to go out, get LastPass, because I bet you there are other security things that you're doing that are worse. For instance, having the same password for multiple websites. That's probably worse. Probably more risky. Not having good passwords. That's really risky. And I think we underestimate how good a good password is. You say, well, I've got my kid's birthday mixed with my maiden name. That can't be. Nobody could guess that. Well, yeah, you might be surprised. A good password is long and really random and combines numbers, upper and lowercase letters, and if the site allows you, and some don't, but if the site allows you, special characters like % and $sign and things like that. The more random, the longer, the better. Now, what's nice about LastPass is you can go through your sites one by one and change the passwords and make them random. LastPass will give you good, strong, random passwords. Make them 16 or 20 characters. And they'll be really random, and you'll say, well, I can't remember that. You don't have to. LastPass does. It stores it safely and securely. So it'll generate a new password for you that's good, and it'll keep track of it. You do have to remember one password. That's your LastPass password. The other nice thing about LastPass is you can put it on everything, Windows and Mac. You could put it on your Android device and your iPhone. It's everywhere. And LastPass is implemented correctly so that even though they were vulnerable to Heartbleed, and they fixed it right away, at no point was anybody's information compromised because LastPass doesn't know your passwords. Only you do. And only you can get them. So there are other password managers, and it's fine to use those. That's better, absolutely. 1Pass, there's tons of them. But I like LastPass. I pay $1 a month for the premium just because it's good. Now, it's a little complicated. What I'm going to do is put it up on the website, and it's not up there yet, but I'll put it up in the next couple of days, a kind of a primer on how to do LastPass. But right now, you want it installed on all your browsers because it fills in passwords automatically. It will generate new passwords for you on sites, making that easy to do. The other thing that'll protect you, and it's a good idea, is two-factor authentication. And most of the big sites now, including most banks, will allow you to have a second, number texted to you. And that is absolutely better. Leo Laporte, the tech guy. It's not free, it's freemium. Leo Laporte, the tech guy, 8888 Ask Leo. You can ask questions if you want about Heartbleed or anything that's on your mind, technology of any kind, chips and all of that stuff. I've been saying on the show for 5 years, get LastPass. And do real passwords and strong passwords, and I understand. It's really also a problem on mobile, because on mobile, if you have a 20-character, really random password, typing it on mobile is a nightmare. I understand that. LastPass actually makes it easier because you can copy the password and then paste it in. So now that everybody has copy and paste on the mobile platforms, it's not so bad, and I tell you, I use it. And let me underscore how important second-factor authentication is. If you have second factor turned on, and I'll explain what two-factor authentication is in a second, but if you have it turned on, you don't have to worry at all. That's not been compromised. So here's what two-factor authentication. You should still change your password, but it's nothing to panic about. The idea of authentication is, the whole idea of a password is to prove you are who you say you are, right? So you go to your bank and you need to tell them I'm me so I can transfer money. And this is a big issue, as authentication, this whole notion of authentication. In fact, anytime we have a transaction, Authentication's everything. When you go to a store and use a credit card, they ask for a driver's license. They want to really identify that it's you using it, right? That's the whole issue on money transfers. So cash, when I give you $1, you know it's me, and you don't. That's a real dollar. So we don't have to worry about it. But as we move to a cashless society, we do more electronic stuff, more online stuff. Authentication becomes the big issue. Authentication is simply proving you are who you say you are. Now, there are several ways to do this. You can do it with something you know that only you know. A password's a good example. I've memorized this magic passphrase, and only I know it. And so if I give you the passphrase correctly, it's got to be me. Well, you can see the flaw in this. If, for instance, you use your social security number as a password. They used to do that. Well, unfortunately, you may not be the only one who knows that. Passwords can be leaked, as in this case, accidentally by the other side, right? There are all sorts of problems with passwords, but that's the most common form of authentication. You can make authentication better by using two forms. So there's three total possibilities. There's something you know, like a password, something you have, like your cell phone, and something you are, like biometrics, like a fingerprint. If we mix two different forms of authentication, that makes it more than twice as effective. So that's why initially these happened as dongles. Maybe you've seen these little keychain dongles that VeriSign and others, sometimes your company will give you one. You press a button on it, it gives you a 6-digit number. That's something you have. Now, by itself, it's not better than a password. But the two together are great, right? I have a password and this second factor authentication. It's great. Fingerprint would be good too. A super secure facility, you might do all three: a password, a code card, and biometrics. Measure your hand or your irises or your fingerprint. All three. Now we're really talking secure. And there are facilities that require all three. I think two is good. And there are a couple of ways to do that, something you have. One would be to have a dongle, sometimes it's a credit card, that generates a number. The way this works is actually very simple. You have a secret number, a very long secret number that's yours, you know, and the receiving party knows. In fact, they give it to you. And then they take that secret number and they mush it around with the current time. And as long as your two devices are pretty much in sync within 30 seconds of each other, you're both going to get the same number. So I have this little card. I tell the bank, this is the serial number of the card. Now they know what my secret number is. We both know exactly what time it is. We mush it around and we get a 6-digit number. If my 6-digit number on that card matches the 6-digit number the bank expects, they say, bingo, you're in. Combine that with a password, really good. You may also see my bank, for instance, doesn't do it that way. They send me a text message. Same idea. Actually, they can generate that 6-digit number any way they want. I don't have to know how. I just have to get the text message. But that proves I have my phone. So I had something I know, my password, plus something I have my phone. Those two things together are much more secure. Now, of course, if your password's been compromised, then it's no longer two-factor. It's simply one-factor. However, the bad guy still needs your phone or that dongle to get into your bank account. So you don't have to panic. Still be worth changing it. In fact, it's not a bad idea to periodically change all your passwords. That's why I think a lot of companies are saying, just change it. We don't know how serious this is. It probably isn't. It's an ugly bug. It's an ugly bug, and it's potentially very serious, but we just don't know. We don't know, how much stuff has been stolen by the bad guys or whether it was useful to them or who was doing it. So it's sensible to err on the side of prudence here. Get a password manager, LastPass. Start generating good long passwords. That's going to improve your security more than anything else. Replace your passwords on your bank, on Amazon, the eBay, e-commerce sites that you use, PayPal. Replace your password on Twitter, Google, Yahoo, Facebook. And then on sites that allow two-factor, turn it on. I know it's a little less convenient, but it's not horrible. Facebook does it, Twitter does it, Tumblr does it, Google does it. Really important that you secure your email, because most websites have an email recovery system, a password recovery system that goes to that email address. So if a bad guy can get into your email then he or she can just go somewhere and say, I lost my password. Could you send me a new one? And they've got your email, and they go, oh, yeah, thank you. And they can change your password. So very important, probably number one thing to secure is your email. And it's a good idea every few months to change your email password. Because if it does leak out, the bad guy can be getting your email without you knowing. He can just check it whenever he feels like it. Then you'll never know. So change that password anyway. This is an opportunity. Spend a little time this weekend changing the passwords. You don't have to change it on everything, just on the stuff that you need to keep secure. Credit cards, banking, e-commerce. And it probably would be a good idea to keep an eye on your statements from those sites for the next few months. You should be doing that anyway, right? And any unexpected charges you should pay attention to. But honestly, it's not a time to panic. It's just an opportunity to kind of get your passwords in order. Authentication is so important. We don't want to mess around with that. You want to be able to say, I'm me, without in any way there being any risk of somebody else saying they're you successfully. That's really the bottom line. Authentication is about proving you are who you say you are so that you can exchange money and exchange information. And if you don't want other people to have access to your stuff, your money, your information, then make sure you have a good password. And if that site allows it, and every bank should, turn on second factor authentication. And if your bank doesn't, ask them why not. Banks, it's interesting because banks, again, as I said, don't want to talk about this. They never want to talk about security issues. They don't want to scare anybody. But I understand there's been a move towards regulating banks, to telling banks, you got to fix this. You got to fix this, whether you want to admit it or not. This is, by now, everybody who really needs to probably has. This is a good time to change those passwords. Leo Laporte, the Tech Guy.